In the aftermath of 9/11, recovery workers reported seeing a woman in a World War II Red Cross uniform, a woman who shouldn't have been there. September 11, 2001 changed the world. But could its after effects linger beyond memory? From angels leading souls to messages from loved ones, these stories blur the line between grief and the inexplicable. In the days following the September 11 attacks, a temporary morgue and recovery center was established at Staten Island's Fresh Kills landfill. This was where debris, personal belongings, and human remains from Ground Zero were carefully sifted and cataloged. For weeks, recovery workers, police, and volunteers spent long hours combing through the wreckage. And it was here that some of the strangest reports began to surface. Retired NYPD Lieutenant Frank Mara was one of those on site. Years later, he described repeatedly seeing a woman who seemed completely out of place. She was dressed in a World War II-era Red Cross uniform, carrying a tray of sandwiches and coffee, as if she had stepped out of another time. He wasn't alone. Other workers noticed her too. The strange woman would appear on the edge of the landfill, watching them work. But whenever anyone tried to approach, she would vanish. At first, some thought she might be a volunteer, but no one matched her description. There were no Red Cross workers wearing uniforms like that in 2001. The sightings were so vivid, Mara was convinced she was real. Only later did he start to believe she might have been something else. Some recovery workers called her a soul collector, a benevolent spirit meant to guide the dead. Others thought she was a ghost tied to the immense grief of the site, drawn back to serve the same duty she may have performed decades earlier. But she wasn't the only figure reported. Alongside her, workers described fleeting shadows moving through the rubble, figures in the periphery that disappeared when looked at directly. Whether born of exhaustion, trauma, or something beyond human understanding, the landfill became a place where the living and the dead seemed to overlap. On the morning of September 11, Flight 93 was hijacked. The passengers on board made the ultimate sacrifice, forcing the plane down in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, stopping it from reaching its intended target, believed to be the U.S. Capitol. What happened in the air is heroic and well documented, but what happened on the ground afterward is something else entirely. When first responders and investigators reached the crash site, they were confronted with devastation. There was little wreckage, and the impact had been so violent that many said it looked as though the plane had simply disappeared into the earth. Among those on scene was Lily Leonardi, an FBI agent serving as a liaison that day. What she says she witnessed has remained one of the most haunting stories tied to Flight 93. Leonardi later described seeing a mist rise from the crash site, and within it, she said she saw hundreds of shimmering figures, angelic beings, glowing in white, lining the perimeter of the field. She believed they were there to guide the souls of the passengers home. The vision was so overwhelming that she kept it private for years before finally speaking about it publicly. To some, Leonardi's account was a trauma response. To others, it was something far more profound. But even skeptics admit her story captures the spiritual weight of what happened in that field, an act of sacrifice that may have echoes beyond the physical world. For many families of 9/11 victims, the grief never ended. But in the months and years that followed, some reported experiences that felt like more than just memory. They felt like visits. Widows, parents, and children spoke of vivid dreams where their loved ones appeared, not as fleeting shadows, but in full detail. In one widely shared account, a young boy told his mother that he had spoken to his father, a firefighter lost in the towers. The boy repeated jokes only his dad would have known, bringing his mother to tears. For her, it was proof that her husband had found a way to say goodbye. Others described waking in the night to the smell of their loved one's cologne, or hearing a familiar voice whisper their name. One woman recounted how her missing sister appeared at the foot of her bed, smiling, before fading into the dark. These experiences, while deeply personal, were shared by so many that they became part of the collective narrative of 9/11's aftermath. Psychologists often explain such visions as grief responses, the brain finding ways to comfort itself under unbearable loss. But for those who lived them, These moments were not illusions. They were messages, signs that love survives even in the face of tragedy. For the families left behind, these experiences offered something priceless, not fear, but a fragile sense of peace. After disasters like September 11, stories of ghosts, angels, and messages from beyond often multiply. Psychologists have long studied this phenomenon, and many believe it has to do with the way the human mind processes grief and trauma. When faced with sudden, overwhelming loss, the brain seeks meaning, a way to make sense of the senseless. For some, that meaning takes the form of visions or signs. A dream that feels too real, a voice in the night, or a figure glimpsed in the corner of the eye. These experiences can bring comfort where logic cannot. Researchers also point to something called collective trauma. When a tragedy affects not just individuals, but entire communities or nations, paranormal stories can spread quickly. They serve as a way to connect people, to express grief in a shared language of mystery and spirit. In the case of 9/11, thousands of families were left without closure, and for many, stories of contact with loved ones filled the silence. But there's another perspective. Paranormal investigators argue that such tragedies create what they call a psychic imprint, an energy left behind by the intensity of suffering. This, they say, explains why places like Ground Zero or the Flight 93 field continue to feel charged, almost alive with echoes of the past. Whether psychological or supernatural, one thing is clear. After September 11th, countless people felt they had experienced something beyond this world. The stories of 9/11's aftermath are unlike any other. A woman in a Red Cross uniform who vanishes when approached, strange cries and shadows at Ground Zero, a vision of angels rising from a Pennsylvania field, and families who swear their loved ones reached out one last time. For skeptics, these are the natural results of grief, exhaustion, and trauma, the mind's way of protecting itself against unbearable loss. For believers, they are proof that tragedy leaves echoes, and that love is strong enough to cross even the boundary between life and death. What's most haunting is that so many of these stories come from ordinary people: recovery workers, police, FBI agents, widows, and children. People with no reason to fabricate such accounts. Whether psychological or supernatural, they form part of the collective memory of 9/11, adding another layer of mystery to a day already marked by unimaginable loss. Perhaps that's why these stories endure. They remind us that behind the statistics were real people, parents, children, friends, whose presence may still be felt. They remind us of the resilience of the human spirit, and maybe, just maybe, of something beyond our understanding. So what do you think? Were these paranormal encounters signs of the afterlife, or the mind's way of healing? Share your thoughts below, and if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for the next haunting chapter.